Lucia Marino stepped out of the Vaporetto onto the sun-bleached docks of the Arsenale just before the gate's midday lock slide, her heart pounding with anticipation. Under one arm she carried a lightweight carbon fiber crate bristling with holographic projectors, in her other hand, a sleek tablet loaded with her most daring body of work, 3 immersive installations blending Venetian lore with digital lightcraft. She approached the iron gates draped in Biennale banners, flowers of color and promise fluttering in the lagoon breeze, and smiled at the polished attendant scanning credentials. But as Lucia presented her press pass and guest artist badge, the lead curator's voice clipped through the morning din. "I'm sorry, Ms. Moreno, but your holographic series falls outside our traditional remit this year." His eyes betrayed no sympathy as he tapped the list on his clipboard, his finger stopping at experimental media, rejected. Lucia blinked, recalling the months of prototype testing in her tiny Dorsadura studio, the painstaking calibration of each projector to dance upon water. She pleaded for any alternative venue, an alley pavilion, a backlot space, anything to salvage her festival debut. But the curator's courteous shake of the head sealed her fate. Venice seeks such innovation next season. For now, the gates remain closed. Lucia felt a cold hollow open in her chest as she watched festival-goers in Armani suits and silk scarves glance back at her crates with polite curiosity before moving on. Left alone among the ornate columns and marble lintels of the Arsenale's storied facade, Lucia inhaled the salty air. The distant toll of St. Mark's bells echoed across the water, marking each passing second. Gripping her tablet, she realized that rejection here would not silence her vision. If Venice's grand exhibition would not embrace her holograms, she would find another stage, one where the Grand Canal itself would become her canvas under the midnight sky. That evening, as the Arsenale's great gates clanged shut behind departing tourists, Lucia slipped away toward the Sodere waterfront, where a forgotten squirrel lay hidden between peeling plaster walls and swaying wooden pilings. The narrow alley of boatyards, long emptied of gondola craftsmen, smelled of aged teak and salty dampness. In the last golden rays of sunset, Lucia unlocked the padlock on a rusted door and nimbly climbed a ladder into the derelict floating warehouse she had scouted weeks before. Inside, the cavernous hull echoed with her footsteps. Boards creaked underfoot and old fishing nets hung in dusty drapes from the rafters. A single lantern swung by a frayed rope, casting a flickering amber glow across overturned barrels and bundles of seaweed. Beneath the cavernous ceiling lay the promise of blank walls and open floor space, perfect for translating her holograms from concept to spectacle. She and her 2 assistants, Marco, a maverick electrician, and Sofia, a laser mapping specialist, unpacked crates of lightweight projectors, miniature servers, and fiber optic cables. They hoisted a long aluminum beam into position along the warehouse's waterline, clamping it to the warped pilings that creaked in the lapping tide. Marco anchored a row of panoramic emitters to the beam, angling each at precisely 30 degrees to maximize their reflection on the canal's rippling surface. Sophia spread out floor plans on a plywood board propped against a barrel. With a laser pointer, she traced the path of midnight Vaporetto traffic and sketched the ideal projection angles for Lucia's first hologram, a flock of translucent seagulls whose wings would bleed silver into the water. Together, they measured distances with a digital rangefinder, ensuring the projector's beams would overlap seamlessly. Lucia commanded her tablet, opening her custom light choreography software. She loaded her sculptural designs, an ethereal gondolier wading through air, a drifting cascade of virtual water lilies, in cue test sequences. As she tapped play, the warehouse walls came alive. Projections flickered on the rough planks, delicate ripples of light wavering across beams, the barest glint of holographic wings slicing through shadow. They worked late into the night, adjusting focus dials, calibrating brightness against the ambient glow of distant street lamps, and fine-tuning the synchronized shutters that would conceal the projectors until launch. In the hush between each test, the only sound was the soft drip of water and the hum of electronics. At last, as the lantern dimmed to a dying spark, Lucia surveyed their handiwork, a clandestine studio afloat on the lagoon, pulsing with hidden possibility, poised to transform Venice's sleeping waterways into an otherworldly gallery once the moon rose high. Shortly before midnight, the trio slipped out of the derelict warehouse and into a narrow sandalo tied to the quay. The night air was thick with salt and history, the dim glow of street lamps on Dorsaduro's waterfront barely illuminating the rippling canal. Lucia pushed off from the landing, her heart thundering as Marco rowed them toward their launch point opposite the Piazza San Marco basin, Sofia clutching her tablet and laser rangefinder. As they approached the Grand Canal's main channel, Lucia instructed Sofia to initiate the GPS-synchronized countdown. Marco moored the sandalo against a weathered piling, its varnish worn bare by decades of tide and craft. Lucia and Marco hauled the fold-out scaffold, a lattice of aluminum poles and outriggers, aboard and quickly locked it into position at the water's edge. From beneath the deck, Sofia passed up coiled power cables and HDMI lines, which Marco clipped into place along the scaffold's outward arms. At 11:59, Sofia whispered, 3, 2, and Lucia tapped her tablet's go command. Instantly, the projector sputtered to life, a hush of fans, a soft whir of lenses focusing. The first hologram, a solitary seagull, materialized just above the canal's surface, its translucent form traced in pearly white light. The bird's wings beat once, twice, then soared along the water, its shimmering reflection rippling across the waves. Encouraged, Lucia advanced to the next sequence. The holographic gondolier appeared mid-canal, or raised in salute. The figure's coat, a phosphorescent red and gold, flickered under the projector's beams as if caught in a breeze. Spectators on distant balconies gasped, while passing Vaporetto commuters paused mid-step, their cell phones raised to capture the scene. Marco monitored the power draw on his portable generator, its LED gauge steady at 80%. Sofia adjusted the laser mapping module, realigning one projector's keystone to correct a slight skew on the warehouse's sidewall. Lucia watched the live feed on her tablet's high-definition viewer, ensuring each hologram aligned with her original spatial design. Then, at the stroke of midnight, San Marco's bells carrying across the lagoon, the full cascade sequence erupted. Tens of thousands of tiny holographic water droplets fell from an invisible source above, pooling into a shimmering lily pond that drifted slowly toward the Rialto Bridge. Following the pond, dozens of ethereal seagulls alighted upon its surface, their bodies glowing with bioluminescent hues of emerald and sapphire. From the warehouses lining the Giudecca shore to the gilt facades of the Doge's palace, a spellbound hush settled over Venice. In that suspended moment, Lucia's midnight launch had reclaimed the Grand Canal, turning it into a living canvas of light and shadow, proof that even the oldest city could be reborn in the glow of tomorrow's art. As the holographic water lilies drifted past the Rialto Bridge, Venice held its breath. On the steps of the Fondaco dei Tedeschi, luxury shoppers paused their late-night strolls. Gondoliers, mid-song, let their voices trail off as they stared, oars dripping with reflected light. In the cafes lining the Riva degli Schiavoni, waiters halted between tables, eyes fixed on the canal. Patrons dipped their glasses to the luminous spectacle before them. A cluster of art students on the Zattare waterfront fumbled for their phones, filming the scene's every detail, the way the virtual gondoliers caught the rippling lamplight, the seagulls' wings shimmering like living glass, the soft green glow of the lily pads as they floated beneath centuries-old facades. Their live stream caption scrolled rapidly, #HoloVenice, must see at midnight. Within moments, the hashtag had ignited on Twitter and Instagram, drawing virtual crowds even as real ones gathered. Meanwhile, a late-night Vaporetto glided past, its overhead lamppost bathing passengers in warm light. A tourist couple in the bow gasped, leaning into each other, "Is that real?" A uniformed security boat idled nearby, its crew transfixed rather than enforcing any ban. For a moment, authority bowed to wonder. On the lagoon's opposite bank, the shuttered windows of private palazzi reflected the holograms back onto their stone walls, doubling the illusion. A caretaker in a faded gondola house unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the balcony, staring upward as the holographic seagulls swooped toward the Doge's palace's sculpted arches. In the plush boxes of Teatro La Fenice, late-night staff watched from the rehearsal windows, their ornate crimson curtains framing a scene no stage could match. Across the internet, art critics and travel bloggers leapt at the trending posts. A leading architecture magazine posted in urgent dispatch, "Venice meets holography, a midnight rebellion of light." Video loops of the water's phosphorescent bloom spread across news sites in New York, Paris, and Shanghai. Even the Biennale's official feed scrambled to retweet the footage, admitting, "An unsanctioned installation has captured Venice's beating heart." Back on the floating warehouse, Lucia, Marco, and Sofia huddled around the tablet as viewer counts climbed by the thousands. The incandescent hush of the Rio Canal was mirrored by the electric hum of global screens, proof that their covert exhibition had transcended locked gates and glittering palazzi to unite both Venetians and the world in a single, unforgettable moment of shared wonder. Sprassid chat by the time the church bells tolled 1 in the morning, #HoloVenice was everywhere. In St. Mark's Square, cafe owners pause their clearing of tables to scroll through social media feeds on their phones, replaying loops of the holographic gondolier saluting beneath the Doge's palace. Stallholders at the nearby fish market paused as the first light of dawn crept over the rooftops, swapping the day's catch for screenshots of luminous seagulls hovering above the Grand Canal. Across the lagoon on Giudecca, Vaporetto stops emptied as commuters, hospital nurses finishing late shifts and hotel concierges closing registers, gathered on the quayside, mouths agape at the faint afterglow shimmering on the water. One woman, still in her uniform, raised her phone and cheered, "Viva Venezia!" A barista in a 24-hour espresso stand quickly printed flyers with a QR code linking to Lucia's clandestine event page, urging early birds to return at midnight for another show. Meanwhile, international news outlets scrambled to cover the phenomenon. In London, a travel magazine ran a full spread, Venice's secret hologram festival, complete with high-resolution stills of holographic lilies drifting beneath neon-washed palazzi. In Tokyo, an architecture blog dissected the technical feat, marveling at the seamless integration of digital art and UNESCO-protected heritage. Parisian art critics dubbed it an insurgent masterpiece in their morning edition, while New York's cultural podcast replayed eyewitness audio, capturing gasps and applause echoing off centuries-old stone. Even the Biennale's official social channels couldn't resist. At 2:30 a.m., the Biennale's Twitter account posted, "We've been captivated by an unsanctioned display on the Grand Canal. Ms. Marino's holograms embody Venice's spirit of innovation. We look forward to welcoming her to our program." Within minutes, that tweet racked up thousands of retweets, their collective voice echoing across time zones. Festival directors in Venice's Doge's Palace office exchange urgent messages. One curatorial email simply read, "We can't ignore this. Make way." On the Rialto Bridge, wide-eyed tourists clustered for sunrise selfies with faint holographic ripples still visible in the water below, snapping photos that would be the envy of every travel influencer. Gondoliers, once wary of technological intrusion, extended their poles in solidarity, draping gondolas with small flags bearing hologram motifs and guiding camera-toting passengers through the very scenes Lucia had conjured. Back in her covert studio, Lucia watched the web analytics climb into the tens of thousands. Marco and Sophia exchange exhausted but triumphant grins, their clandestine hours rewarded by global acclaim. As daylight settled over Venice's ancient stones, it became clear, a single, forbidden installation had reshaped the city's narrative, proving that true art would always find a way to light even the darkest corners of history. As the first rosy fingers of dawn gilded the bell towers of San Marco, the directors of the Venice Biennale convened an urgent session in the 18th century Biblioteca Marciana. Curatorial heavyweights, their silk ties loosened and scarves untied, clustered around a long walnut table ringed with leather-bound volumes. The archivist's lamps cast pools of golden light on maps of the lagoon and lists of approved installations, but the only item on everyone's mind was the midnight hologram spectacle on the Grand Canal. Biennale President Alessandra Rossi rose to speak, her voice echoing off frescoed walls. "Our gates remain closed to Lucia Marino, yet her art poured through our city like water. The world is calling us to reconsider." She gestured to a montage of seagull and gondolier clips flashing on the room's projection screen, each frame accompanied by global media headlines. A ripple of murmurs agreed, this unsanctioned work had upended Venice's entire narrative overnight. Director of exhibitions Marco Bellini leaned forward, fingers steepled. Her holograms honored Venice's past while forging its future. "We cannot feign ignorance any longer." He tapped his pen against a leather dossier and proposed a bold motion. Invite Lucia to mount an official nocturnal installation along the Biennale's waterfront, complete with logistical support, power supplies, and a dedicated curatorial statement. The room fell silent as each member weighed tradition against innovation. Finally, the president nodded. "Carve out a prime canal location," she said decisively. "We'll feature a reef of light under our official banner. Lucia Marino will headline tonight's opening, no more shadows, only spotlight." Within the hour, an emissary rode across the lagoon to Lucia's hidden Squiro studio. He delivered an elegantly scripted invitation on thick cream paper, sealed with the Biennale's line insignia, an offer of a nightly 45-minute holographic residency, full technical integration, and a private reception on the palace terrace. At sunrise, Lucia, her hair still damp from the night's exertions, read the letter by lantern light, tears mingling with a triumphant smile as she realized her renegade gallery had blossomed into institutional acclaim. Later that morning, she stood before the curatorial team on the Riva degli Schiavoni, mapping out the new installation's footprint. Logistics chiefs sketched power grids across the canal's edge, while marine engineers calculated gondola-safe distances. The Biennale's official photographer captured the moment. Lucia, arms crossed over her holographic tablet, her gaze fixed on the waterway that had transformed rejection into renaissance. By midday, word had spread through the festival's cafes and kiosks. Marino's holograms now official. Passers-by stopped to congratulate her as she passed beneath fluttering Biennale flags. In the Doge's palace courtyard, art patrons lined up for preview passes to the evening's sanctioned display. And as the sun climbed higher over the lagoon, Venice itself seemed to shimmer with possibility, proof that when an artist's vision proves too luminous to lock away, even the oldest institutions will open their doors at last. By the time twilight draped Venice in its indigo cloak, the Grand Canal was poised for Lucia Marino's sanctioned return. Gondolas lined the water's edge, their prows adorned with silver lanterns. Along the Riva degli Schiavoni, temporary power hubs hummed softly, buried beneath decorative covers. Curators in tailored blazers checked control consoles one last time, while uniformed technicians adjusted the freshly painted mounting brackets on the dockside gallery platform. At precisely 9 p.m., the Biennale's master of ceremonies stepped to a podium beneath fluttering Italian and Biennale flags. He welcomed an audience of dignitaries, critics, and art lovers, seated in gilded folding chairs on floating barges moored along the canal. When his brief address concluded, he announced, "Tonight, we inaugurate Lucia Marino's Reef of Light, our first official holographic residency." Lucia stood backstage, inside a restored boat pavilion, wearing a tailored black coat over her VR pattern dress. Her hands trembled with anticipation as she tapped her tablet. Marco and Sofia nodded in unison, then stepped aside. With a soft go, Lucia triggered the first sequences. Immediately, the water before the Palazzo Ducale shimmered. A flock of luminescent seagulls burst into being, drifting upward in ghostly arcs. The crowd gasped, then applauded as 5 rings of light aligned to form the Biennale's emblem above the ancient stone facade. Each ring pulsed in time with a low choral note transmitted to discrete speakers beneath the barges, weaving a tapestry of sound and light. Lucia guided the show through 7 vignettes, each a nod to Venetian history in her own digital vision. A holographic gondolier materialized beneath the Bridge of Sighs, his oar stirring no water but echoing with a mournful trombone solo. A cascade of virtual lilies tumbled from an invisible aqueduct, their petals carpeting the canal's surface in glowing mosaic. Finally, a colossal digital whale breached above the waterline, arcs of bioluminescent plankton pulsing along its form before it dove back into the depths, sending ripples of multicolored light across the barges. Throughout the performance, the polished marble of nearby palazzi reflected every hue, ruby reds, sapphire blues, and emerald greens, while the audience leaned forward, entranced. Cameras aboard the barges captured close-ups, a critic's tearful smile, a young child's eyes wide in wonder, a curator's nod of approval. Digital artists live-streamed the spectacle as high-fidelity feeds, ensuring the world watched Venice's waters become a pulsing canvas. As the final tableau, a galaxy of floating orbs ascending in spirals, faded with the last note of the synthesized coro, applause thundered across the canal. Lanterns bobbed in the boats, and the Biennale's official feed returned to the podium, where the master of ceremonies declared, "Lucia Marino's vision has expanded the boundaries of art and heritage alike. Welcome to the future of Venice." Backstage, Lucia exhaled, tears of joy sparkling like the hologram she had conjured. Marco and Sofia embraced her, their triumphant smiles reflecting the glow of a city reborn in light. On the water before them, gondolas drifted away, carrying buoyant souls who would remember this night forever, a closing chapter not of exclusion, but of radiant belonging beneath Venice's misty skies.